All right, buckle up, because today we're diving straight into the dark side.
Ooh, sounds intriguing.
We're talking about Voldemort, but hold on. Not the Dark Lord we meet later.
Right.
We're going way back to his beginnings, to Tom Riddle.
His younger years, fascinating.
Using these excerpts from Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, we're going to try to figure out how a seemingly ordinary kid becomes, well, he who must not be named.
It really is like solving a puzzle, isn't it? Except instead of a nice picture, we're putting together the makings of a monster.
Exactly. It's like those puzzles where the picture is way creepier than you thought it would be.
Right.
Take that scene, Dumbledore's first meeting with young Tom at the orphanage. Riddle's reaction to just being another Tom. That's not just typical teenage angst, is it?
Not at all. It's much deeper than that. You see that deep aversion to being ordinary, that need, that desperate need for control, and it really fuels his pursuit of power later on.
Okay, so he hates feeling powerless, insignificant, relatable.
Yeah.
Right. But then you've got those incidents, like the rabbit incident.
Yeah.
And suddenly it's not teenage moodiness anymore. It's, well, sinister.
It's chilling. What's unsettling is how, even as a child, Tom shows, well, a chilling lack of remorse.
Right.
There's no guilt, no empathy for the things he does, for the harm he causes, and that's a big part of, his transformation.
It's like he looks at the rules, at basic human decency, and just sees weaknesses, things holding him back. Which brings us to Hogwarts. And surprisingly, Hogwarts wasn't where young Tom Riddle became a social outcast.
Quite the opposite. In fact, Hogwarts is where his manipulative side really comes out.
Yeah.
He understands how people see him, how important that is. He creates this charming, likable persona to hide his true self, his true intentions.
Talk about playing the long game. He even applied for a teaching position there later. Can you imagine? Voldemort at the front of a Hogwarts classroom, shaping young minds. Chilling.
It sends shivers down your spine. Dumbledore, with his incredible insight, saw something in Riddle, something that made him cautious, hesitant to offer him the job.
Thank goodness for that. But Voldemort's interest in the dark arts, especially Horcruxes, was already pretty strong by then.
Mm-hmm.
I have to admit, the whole Horcrux concept, it really threw me for a loop the first time I read about it.
It's a very complex piece of magic, very dark. Basically, a Horcrux is an object that a wizard uses to hide a piece of their soul in.
Okay.
And by doing this, they try to achieve a twisted kind of immortality.
Right. So it's not about just living longer. It's about cheating death completely.
Yeah.
And Voldemort didn't just stumble upon this idea. He sought it out, using his charisma and charm to manipulate Professor Slughorn into revealing this very dark and very secret knowledge.
It really shows you his ambition, his willingness to use anyone, even a seemingly harmless teacher, to get what he wants. He sees himself as, above the rules, above, basic human decency.
And the objects he chose for his Horcruxes, they weren't random things, they were important artifacts. Each one reflects his grandiose view of himself.
Exactly. That's what makes his choices so revealing. They're like trophies, proof that he truly believes in his own greatness. It's almost like he wants to rewrite history, to insert himself into this grand narrative of magical power.
It's like he's screaming, "Look at me, I'm not just powerful, I'm eternally significant."
Which brings us to, poor Hepzibah Smith.
Ah, yes. The elderly witch. She owns several valuable artifacts that, unfortunately for her, caught Tom Riddle's eye.
Objects he clearly wanted. And let's be real, no one could turn on the charm quite like Voldemort when he wanted something. Poor Hepzibah, she never stood a chance, did she?
And this is where you see his ruthlessness. He would get rid of anyone, no matter who they were, to possess those objects, to make them his Horcruxes.
And framing Hoki, the house elf, for the murder, that's just cold. But what's really disturbing?
What's the similarities between Hoki being forced to confess to something she didn't do, and how the Ministry later tries to discredit Harry. It just goes to show that people in power, whether it's Voldemort or the Ministry, will twist the truth, manipulate things to get what they want.
That is a chilling thought, isn't it? Even in the wizarding world, truth can be a very fragile thing, especially with powerful people pulling the strings.
Okay, so we've got this rising Dark Lord, craves power, disregards human life, a master manipulator. Where do we go from here?
It's like watching someone solve a really dark, twisted scavenger hunt, isn't it?
Seriously, the level of planning, the manipulation, and he's just a teenager at this point.
Right.
It really makes you think, What if he had gotten that teaching job at Hogwarts?
Oh, wow.
Can you imagine the stories he would tell in defense against the dark arts?
Let's be real. It would be more like Triumphs of the Dark Arts with Professor Riddle in charge.
Oh, totally. And, his whole fascination with immortality,
Yes.
that went way beyond a normal curiosity.
Oh, absolutely.
He didn't just want to live longer. He wanted to conquer death itself.
Exactly. It was an obsession.
And that's where the whole Horcrux thing comes back in. I mean, splitting your soul into 7 pieces, that's next level dark magic. It's like soul surgery for the sake of immortality.
It speaks to a deep-seated fear, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. He's out there terrorizing people, spreading fear, and yet he's terrified of the very thing he's inflicting on others.
He is.
But how did he even know where to start with all this? Splitting your soul, that's not exactly common knowledge, even in the wizarding world.
Remember Slughorn's memory? Tom wasn't satisfied with just the theory of Horcruxes. He needed the practical knowledge. He pushed Slughorn for details, testing the limits of what was acceptable, even in a conversation about dark magic.
And Slughorn, bless his heart, he was always so eager to impress. But it's the objects Voldemort chooses, the ones worthy of holding pieces of his soul, that really get to me.
What do you mean?
It's like, what does that say about him, on a deeper level?
You're right, you're onto something. Dumbledore believed Voldemort wouldn't just choose any random objects. They had to be significant, valuable, a reflection of his own, let's say, inflated ego.
Right. It wasn't just about living forever. It was about crafting his image, his legacy.
Precisely. He wanted to be remembered as powerful, important, terrifying for all time.
So what kind of objects scream Voldemort to you? If you had to guess, what would he consider worthy of housing a piece of his soul?
Given his history, his obsession with Hogwarts, it wouldn't be a stretch to imagine him targeting objects connected to the founders.
Whoa, hold on. You're saying he might have hidden Horcruxes at Hogwarts?
It's a possibility, isn't it?
That's insane. Imagine hiding pieces of his soul in the very place he was denied a proper place. It'd be the ultimate act of defiance.
And let's not forget the irony. Voldemort, who wanted to reshape the wizarding world, might have hidden pieces of himself in the very institution he felt rejected by.
Okay, now that's just creepy. It all comes back to that need for control we talked about, that desire for validation, even from a young age.
He craved recognition, power, and he would go to any lengths to achieve it.
We've uncovered some pretty dark stuff today, and we're not even finished. Before we go even deeper, maybe take a moment to process all of this, because trust me, it's about to get even more intense.
You ready for the final layer of this dark puzzle?
Always up for a little more darkness, especially when it comes to understanding Voldemort. But today, it's less about his grand plans and more about those eerie parallels between his past and, well, Harry's journey.
It's like they're two sides of the same coin, isn't it? Two boys, marked by fate, touched by magic, both lose their parents, but the way they react, it couldn't be more different.
Right. It's almost cruel how the universe gives them these similar tragedies, these echoes of loss, but leads to such wildly different outcomes. Voldemort chooses power, chooses darkness. And Harry, he clings to his humanity, his capacity for love, even when it hurts.
And that's the crux of it, isn't it? Love, connection. Harry finds strength in his mother's sacrifice, in the love that literally saved him. Voldemort, he sees his mother's death as a weakness, a sign of her ordinariness.
It's like he blames her for not being extraordinary, like he punishes her, even in death, for not being something more.
There's a bitterness there, a resentment that festers. He couldn't control her fate, couldn't stop her death, so he rejects the very idea of love, sees it as a vulnerability, a threat.
And in doing so, he becomes the very thing he fears. Empty. Alone.
Wow.
Defined by power, not purpose.
Exactly. And that emptiness, it breeds cruelty. He doesn't see people, he sees pawns, obstacles in his way. But let's get back to those parallels we were discussing. The whole Sectum Sempra incident, for example.
Oh, you mean when Harry almost becomes the very thing he's fighting against?
It's a turning point, isn't it?
It's terrifying, really.
Yeah.
That spell, the way it's described in that old potions book, pure darkness, it's like something straight out of Voldemort's playbook.
Which is ironic, considering it was most likely created by Snape, Harry's supposed protector, at least within the walls of Hogwarts.
Right. Talk about a twisted web. But Harry resists. He pulls back. He doesn't let that darkness consume him.
He stumbles, makes mistakes, but he keeps choosing love over hate, connection over isolation. It's what makes him human, relatable even.
Exactly. He messes up, doubts himself, but he never gives up. He shows us that it's not our worst moments that define us, but the choices we make afterward. that even in the face of darkness, we can choose something better.
He does. And, exploring Voldemort's story, this descent into darkness, it's not just about understanding a villain. It's about recognizing those warning signs within ourselves.
Right. It's about understanding the temptations we all face, the choices we make that lead us towards the light or drag us down into darkness.
And on that note, I think we've done our due diligence in dissecting the mind of one of literature's most compelling villains.
We've gone deep into the dark side today, explored some uncomfortable truths, but hopefully we've learned a thing or two about ourselves along the way.
We have.
Remember, folks, the world isn't black and white. It's full of shades of gray. It's up to each of us to choose our path. And on that cheerful note, until next time, keep those wands at the ready, and we'll see you on the flip side for another deep dive.